Alright, hello once again, Jeff Scott of Rankin Technical College. I've been going through a series of video presentations I'm making based on the PowerPoint slides for Murox HTML5 and CSS3 4th edition. This book is one of the two books that's used for the Rankin Technical College AWD, or Application and Web Development 1000 Web Development Technologies class. So far I've gone through first 8 chapters here. I'm now going to do chapters 9 and 10. I've done 11 through 15 and 17 through 20. So I've got 3 chapters left. Alright. And the current chapter that I'm on right now, chapter 9, is on how to use Flexbox or Flexbox for page layout and responsive web design. I'm going to go over the slides, and then I'm going to go over a couple of other things that I would recommend, because to me, using Flexbox and using the grid are two of the harder things when you first start getting into this stuff. Okay, so let's just get to it. So Flexbox is one way to lay out web pages. Okay, so we'll describe its use, which I just gave you, talk about some of these terms, explain how the direction affects the way things look. And here's a key thing you've got to realize. All right, there's a lot of information on this slide. The y-axis is referred to as the cross-axis. The x-axis is referred to as the main axis. When you put stuff on here, and I don't mean on the axis or axes, but this is, notice what we have. This is the start, that's the end. So that's the start and end of the x-axis. There is the start and end of the y-axis or cross-axis. All right. The big takeaway that you should get from this chapter and the next chapter is, over time, developers, for lack of better verbiage, got sick and tired of having to use floats for everything. Float this to the left, float this to the right, clear floats, etc. All right. So the idea behind using this is you can totally get rid of using floats. The key thing when you put this in here, notice this, display flex. In fact, what I'm going to try doing here, I don't know if it'll work or not, but what I'm going to try doing is grabbing all of this text that we've got right here, which is, I understand that's more than we would typically grab. Let's grab this first. Copy. Hopefully I've still got something open here. No, I don't. Alrighty. Nope. So we'll come in here. This is going to be very fast, down and dirty. I've even forgotten my HTML tag. Alright, so there was that navigation with the unordered list. You can see it. Alright. So that very simply will be on our desktop. And hopefully I don't have any index.html on here. There that is. And then in our other file, which we'll just throw right on the desktop, this will be our unordered list. All right. Now, what I'm going to do to kind of introduce this is I'm going to comment out all uses in here of Flex. In fact, let's do this. Yes, I will do that. I'm going to comment out everything. You'll understand why, hopefully, in just a minute. So this will be on our desktop, and this will be style.css. All right. So right now, when I run this, it is referencing our style sheet, but our entire style sheet is commented out, all of the innards, so to speak. So when I go back here and I run this, it doesn't look very nice. Pretty much to be expected. But let's start putting the stuff back in one at a time. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to put in, I'm going to do this from the bottom up. So I'm going to add our margin of 0, which says turn off the margin. Ideally, you'll be able to look at this and see what's going on. So see that? I have no more margin. Now you might say, well, you still got areas up here. Let's see what happens when we remove the padding. Now that should be pretty obvious what just happened there. All right, still have a little bit of top. I'm not sure why, but we do. Okay, so you can see how bad that looks. Now, when we remove the list style none, again, I think you all know what that means. Our underlines here should go away. I'm sorry, not the underlines, the styling. And since we had those dots there, all right, the disk, as it's referred to, they're gone. Now, I have to remove both of these at once here because they work in unison. All right? But what I want you to notice, we're displaying flex in a columnar layout. You may say it does or doesn't look different. Let's take a look. All right? Jeff doesn't look any difference. Well, what if we change it from a columnar layout to a row layout? Does that look any different? Okay. We got a big change here without really making any change. Now we'd have to go in and put in some margin, etc., and do some other stuff, but that's okay. I'm not worried about that right now. All right. Let's go back to our slides here. Now the author had said once we did this, it should look like that. Well, I'm looking here, and with no padding and no margin, not sure why it looks like that, but it does. So here it says we're going to come in here, we're going to add different stuff. So let's do that. I'm going to take all of this that's here and just comment it out. All right. So now we're coming in our unordered list, we're telling it to display flex. Sorry about that. Let me clear this out. All right, so for our unordered list, we're saying to display flex. You can see it. We should have some space in between each item. Again, we have removed our disk, and the background color should be silver. With each list item, they should have their own background color, padding, and they should be aligned towards the center. Finally, for each anchor link that is in our UL, we're removing the underline, and we're setting the color of it to 000, which is black. Now I'm just going to show it to you all in one stretch, but if we look at it, well, that looks a lot different. You can see the space between, see the background color. You can tell that each one of these is in their own little box, so to speak, and each one is justified in there. But it really didn't take much work to do that. And again, it's not where we are constantly having to worry about floats. All right, so here are just different changes we can make. We did the space between. I think it was the space between. I don't even remember, and it doesn't matter because you can see the effect when you do different things here. All right. The CSS for a navigation menu that's centered vertically inside of a container. Well, again, let's look at it. The best way for you to learn this stuff is to just grab this code, dummy yourself up a web page, and start taking a look at it. All right? I know that virtually every time I do this, I learned something that I didn't know, or probably more often than not didn't realize before. So again, we're telling it to, as you can see, to display flex, align everything to the center, get rid of our disk, silver background, and a height for each one of 90 pixels. For something in there that we've called home, and I don't think I've got anything called home in mine, it will align itself to itself and do a flex start. So I don't think that this bottom thing here is going to do anything, because I don't think I have anything that's pound home. Let me look. No. So did they put something pound home in here? Not that I can see. But let's take a look at what we have anyway. All right, looks a lot more like it did before we made our changes. All right. This is, as we look in here, we start talking about wrapping. Okay? Do we want things to keep going or not keep going? But the big thing here is you probably would want something more like this. But again, the big takeaway here is you're going to have to probably read this chapter and the next chapter more than once. All right? In order for it to really make sense and start to sink in. So they come in here and they say, here is a simple page layout. This is going to result in basically your nav bar at the top, your content, which typically takes up 2/3, 3/4 of the page here, and a sidebar that's typically over there. Doesn't have to be like that, but that's usually the way it is. So here they use what's called flex basis. And the thing about using flex basis, just so you know, all right, the thing about using this flex basis, it's a way to work with the width. All right. So what we're saying here is that we want the nav and the aside to each take up 1/4 of our area and the section to take up 50%. And it doesn't matter, it doesn't matter what our width is. Keep doing that as much as you can anyway. All right. You can also use what's called a grow property. Now, flex grow for the nav and the aside, basically in this case, notice that this is 3 times more. All right. So if you're working at 100 pixels, or it's at 100 pixels, all right, and the section is 200 pixels. But as it grows, this should grow 3 times, as it gets bigger, 3 times more than either of these two. So there's a lot of different things. You can grow, you can shrink, as it says right here. You can use the flex property on virtually anything you want or need to do. Here they're using it in a media query. Now, why that becomes important is a lot of times when you're working with a media query, when you get down to a smaller screen size, maybe 468 to 767, which is typically like the size of a cell phone to maybe working with a tablet, you may want to start stacking things instead of having them be side to side. You can start to see that here. All right. Now, before I finish up, you say, well, you're done, Jeff? No, I'm not. Because before I finish up, I want to show you a couple resources. The first one is, and I look at this guy a lot. In fact, I'm probably going to become a Patreon, which means I will support him financially. His name is Brad Traversy, and he has a thing called Traversy Media. And I'm going to give you this at the end because I've got about a dozen of his presentations that I've marked up here. All right. I don't want to talk about any of them right now, other than to mention he's got Flexbox CSS in 20 minutes, and it's very well done. So you can take a look at that if, when you have the desire to, if, when you have the time to. Plus W3 Schools, which is always a terrific online resource. So this is under their CSS Advanced. Notice there's CSS Flexbox. All right. And they've always got these try it yourselves. So when you notice here, they've got 8 of these. All right. And they set it up. So why does this matter? Notice here. Display flex with no wrap. All right. So if I come through here and I grab these 4, and I put them in again, and I run it, you can see what happens. It's trying to make this all fit on one line. In other words, no wrap. All right. I don't remember if the other one is just wrap or not. Try that. There you go. Pretty obvious what happens. But you can go through here, and using this thing on W3 Schools, it goes through and it's just example after example after example. Here's the flex direction. Here's the flex wrap, flex flow, etc. I'm not going to read them all to you. The plan right now is after we get done with the slides for the JavaScript book, well, this one, of course, and then the JavaScript book, is to create a website as a class and try to bring in things from every chapter. So when we get to chapters 9 and 10, we'll see if we can take this chapter and add, in this chapter at least, some Flexbox to it. And in the next chapter, some grid layout to it. All right, so that pretty much is it for this chapter. When I come back in just a couple minutes, I'm going to be going over chapter 10, which is how to use grid layouts. All right. Typically, Flex is more for smaller sites, grid is for larger sites. But again, that's a generalization which doesn't always hold true. So I'll be back with chapter 10 in just a couple minutes.